It started with one woman. On a sweltering July morning in 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, a woman named Frau Trophea walked into the street and began to dance. No music, no celebration, no reason anyone could explain. She danced through the afternoon, through the evening, through the night. By the second day, her feet were bleeding. By the fourth day, she hadn't stopped. By the end of the week, 34 people had joined her, and none of them could stop either. This is the story of the dancing plague of 1518, and it is one of the strangest, most terrifying, and most real events in recorded history. To understand what happened in Strasbourg, you need to understand what life was like there in 1518. It was, by almost every measure, a city on the edge. The previous years had brought famine. Crops had failed across the region, and the poor, and there were many, were surviving on almost nothing. Disease moved through crowded streets freely. Syphilis had swept through Europe like a wave. Smallpox was a constant threat. People died young, died suddenly, and died often. The psychological weight of living in that era is almost impossible for a modern person to fully grasp. There was no medicine in any meaningful sense. There was no explanation for why crops failed or why children died. There was only God, fate, and fear. Strasbourg's lower classes were also crushed under the weight of feudal obligations, taxes, tithes, and labor owed to landlords and the church, regardless of how little they had. Starvation wasn't a distant threat, it was a neighbor. Into this pressure cooker in the summer of 1518 stepped Frau Trophea. Within a week, 34 people were dancing alongside her. Within a month, the number had grown to 400. The dancing was not joyful. Witnesses described the dancers as pale, trembling, and desperate, their eyes glazed, their movements frantic and uncontrolled. Many wept as they danced, many screamed, some begged for it to stop. But they could not stop. Their feet bled through their shoes, joints swelled, bodies gave out from exhaustion. And still they danced. Contemporary accounts, recorded by physicians, priests, and city officials, describe people collapsing, being carried off, and then rising again to continue dancing hours later. At its peak, it was reported that 15 people per day were dying from exhaustion, heart failure, and stroke. The city authorities were at a complete loss. What makes the dancing plague so fascinating is not just that it happened, but how the authorities responded to it. Their first instinct was not to stop the dancing, it was to encourage it. Strasbourg City Council, advised by local physicians, concluded that the dancing was caused by hot blood, a medical theory of the time suggesting the body could become overheated and needed to purge itself through movement. Their prescription? More dancing. They hired musicians. They cleared 2 guild halls and a grain market to create dedicated dancing spaces. They brought in professional dancers to join and, in their thinking, help the afflicted work through the episode faster. It made everything worse. With music driving them and space to move, the dancers kept going. New people joined. The outbreak spread. Within weeks, the council reversed course entirely. They banned music, shut down the dancing halls, and expelled the professional dancers from the city. They prayed. They carried effigies through the streets. They sent the worst affected dancers on pilgrimages to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, the patron saint of, among other things, epilepsy and dancing. Some reportedly recovered at the shrine. Most did not. So what was actually happening? Historians and medical researchers have debated this for centuries, and there is still no single definitive answer. But the leading modern theory is both fascinating and deeply human. Mass psychogenic illness. Also called mass hysteria, though that term is now considered somewhat outdated, mass psychogenic illness is a real, documented phenomenon in which psychological stress manifests as physical symptoms that spread from person to person through a community. It is not faking, it is not performance. The symptoms are real, the suffering is real, and in extreme cases, the physical consequences, exhaustion, injury, death, are real. What makes it spread is a combination of extreme stress, a triggering event, and a community that is psychologically primed to believe in a shared explanation for their suffering. In 1518 Strasbourg, that explanation was supernatural. The people genuinely believed they had been cursed, possibly by Saint Vitus himself, who in local folklore was thought to inflict dancing fits on those who offended him. Once that belief took hold, it gave the illness a framework to spread through. Seeing a neighbor dance uncontrollably wasn't bizarre. It was confirmation of something the community already feared was possible. The stress, the starvation, the disease, the fear, it had to go somewhere. And in the summer of 1518, it went into their feet. By September 1518, the dancing plague had largely ended. No one is entirely sure why. The pilgrimages may have provided psychological relief, a ritual resolution to a psychological crisis. The ban on music may have helped remove a trigger that was sustaining the episode. The arrival of cooler autumn weather may have simply broken the environmental conditions that were amplifying the collective stress. Whatever the reason, the dancing stopped. The survivors recovered, more or less, and Strasbourg moved on. But the event left a mark on the historical record that has never fully been explained away. It appears in the writings of physicians, in city council records, in church documents. It happened. 400 people danced, uncontrollably, for weeks. Dozens died, and the city simply absorbed it, the way communities in that era absorbed everything, and kept going. The dancing plague of 1518 is one of history's strangest footnotes. But it is also something more than that. It is a window into what extreme human suffering can do to a community, into how fear spreads, into how the mind, pushed far enough, will find its own way out, even if that way out is terrifying, irrational, and deadly. It could not happen today, or so we tell ourselves. If you found this unsettling, you should. History has a way of being stranger than anything we could invent. If you want more stories like this, subscribe. There are plenty more where this came from.